So there you are, sat with all your mates, beer in each hand and watching MMA, are you? You've trained in a little karate, swept some legs, broke some hearts, you know what you're talking about. Some might say you're an MMA expert and you're currently on your way to successfully predicting the whole damn card. But the fact is, my friend, in MMA, you never know. No one's an expert. One punch, kick or submission can change the entire landscape of a fight in the blink of an eye. So damn it, take off that tap out shirt, you're not fooling anyone. I'm Tom from WhatCulture.com and I'm here with top 10 MMA comebacks. Number 10, Brock Lesnar vs Shane Carwin. After a year-long out-of-ring battle with diverticulitis, Brock Lesnar was finally ready to return to the octagon to defend his UFC gold. The stage was set for UFC 116 and his opponent was who everyone considered the hardest hitter in MMA, Shane Carwin. Prior to this fight with Lesnar, Carwin had been knocking guys out with vicious one-punch power, claiming the UFC interim heavyweight title in doing so. In the first minute of the first round, Carwin had Lesnar badly hurt, knocking him down and opening a cut above his left eye. What followed was 5 minutes of brutal ground and pound until Lesnar was saved by the buzzer. Now, after watching how this first round went down, any expert could have told you that it was only a matter of time until Carwin put Lesnar away, but what followed was miraculous. In the second round, a gassed out Carwin stumbled his way to a pummeled but revitalised Brock Lesnar and was taken down. Lesnar assumed side control and locked in the arm triangle, tapping Carwin out at 2 minutes and 19 seconds into the second round. Lesnar handed Carwin his first loss, earned submission of the night and unified the UFC heavyweight title in what some call the greatest comeback in MMA history. Number 9, Tim Boetsch vs Yushin Okami. Tim Boetsch vs Yushin Okami at UFC 144 was a demonstration of excellent booking. Boetsch had recently moved down to middleweight to test himself in a lighter division where he picked up a couple of wins. Okami was already a primetime player in the middleweight division but was coming off a KO loss to GOAT Anderson Silva. A win for Boetsch would establish himself as a potential title contender, whereas a win for Okami would reinforce that he was still a serious threat in the division. Both men had big stakes in the outcome. For the first 10 minutes of the fight, Okami utilised his superior boxing, cutting angles and finding a home for his left hand, leaving Boetsch in a flustered and bloody mess. As the second round came to a close, Okami was in full mount, just lighting Boetsch up with his vicious ground and pound. Okami was just floating his way to a lovely victory. Then, in round 3, accompanied by the most exciting Joe Rogan commentary to date, Tim Boetsch started landing bombs. He rocked Okami with some big left and right hooks, finally knocking him out with 3 nasty uppercuts. If you're looking for a fight to get you into MMA, this is a must. Number 8, Melvin Manhoef vs Robbie Lawler. Melvin Manhoef vs Robbie Lawler at Strikeforce Miami was always going to be the type of fight that wasn't going to see the second round. Both men were greatly established as knockout artists, holding 35 knockout wins between them prior to the fight. Quite simply, the fans were in for a treat. For the majority of the first round, Manhoef was successfully finding a home for these monstrous leg kicks. Each one looked like a home run hit, with the lucky fan going away with Lawler's right leg. Though Lawler was never in any serious danger, it was doubtful that he was even crawling into the second round, let alone walking. This, however, changed in the blink of an eye. At 3 minutes and 33 seconds into the first round, Robbie threw an overhand right that sent Melvin Manhoef straight to hell. Like, seriously, look at his face. That man is experiencing eternal damnation. Number 7, Travis Browne vs Alistair Overeem. Travis Browne vs Alistair Overeem at Fight Night 26 saw the return of Overeem after he experienced, well, a pretty embarrassing knockout loss to Antonio Bigfoot Silva. After coasting and showboating his way through the first 2 rounds, Overeem left himself open to the hard shots of Bigfoot and got knocked out. He exposed his questionable chin and cost himself a big title fight with Cain Velasquez. Once an untouchable and very bankable fighter, Overeem quietly returned to face underdog Travis Browne. In the first 2 minutes, Overeem delivered some of the most horrifying knees to Browne's gut, forcing him to turtle up. Overeem followed up with 31 right hands to the head, which Browne barely blocked. On top of the action, the referee Mario Yamazaki allowed the fight to continue and somehow Browne made it back to his feet. What followed was the weirdest sight. Almost like he was playing EA UFC on his PlayStation, Browne started spamming Overeem with these front head kicks. Overeem consistently blocked them and just plodded forward. Then, after a few minutes, one of Browne's head kicks connected and Overeem went down. It was all just a bit weird. Browne was telegraphing these kicks and it almost seemed like Overeem had decided he was going to have a go at blocking one with his face. Regardless, hell of a comeback. Number 6, Matt Mitrione vs Carl Sayumanatafa. After making the jump from UFC to Bellator, Matt Meathead Mitrione was set to debut at Bellator 157 against journeyman Carl Manatafa. Seeing as Mitrione was a big signee for Bellator, Manatafa was a pretty safe fight for Mitrione. As the first round got on the way, Manatafa threw a huge overhand right that dropped and spun Mitrione 90 degrees backwards. Manatafa followed up with a few strikes and it was clear that Mitrione had no idea where he was. Astonishingly, referee John McCarthy let the action continue and somehow Mitrione transitioned and found himself in full guard and ultimately got back to his feet. Taking advantage of the position, Mitrione didn't allow Manatafa to reach his feet and began an onslaught of downward strikes. One of these strikes connected on the chin, knocking Manatafa out cold. Not only did he escape with a win that night, but he now owns one of the best comeback wins in MMA history. Number 5. Abel Trujillo vs Jamie Varner. Abel Trujillo vs Jamie Varner was the opening fight to the main card at UFC 169, and man did it kick the pay-per-view off with a bang. There had been a recent resurgence in Jamie Varner's career, replacing an injured Evan Dunham to fight Golden Boy Edson Barbosa at UFC 146, and in what was the upset of the year, Varner walked away with the TKO victory over Barbosa and a place on the UFC roster, and to welcome him to that roster, Abel Trujillo. In the opening round, Varner dragged Trujillo to the ground and muscled his way to a good position for a north-south choke, and that's essentially where the first round stayed. Varner held position but wasn't able to submit Trujillo, and the two ultimately scrambled back to their feet to see the round out. Good round for Varner? Sure. The second round, however, saw Varner connect with a series of hard shots, rocking Trujillo and dropping him. Trujillo recovered, and what ensued was a wild exchange that saw an exhausted Varner walk carelessly into the range of Trujillo, and in spectacular fashion, Trujillo caught Varner with a rogue right hand and put Varner out. An incredible fight, a better comeback. Number 4. Dan Henderson vs Mauricio Shogun Hua 2. Dan Henderson vs Mauricio Shogun Hua put on the greatest back and forth fights in their first encounter at UFC 139, and naturally a second fight was scheduled, this time at Fight Night 38, 2.5 years later. The real question for this rematch though was, did the two men still have it in them to have such an exciting contest? Shogun was coming into the fight with 3 losses in his last 5 fights, whereas Henderson had lost all 3 of his last fights. It sort of seemed that the UFC was desperate to make final money making use out of them before they sort of both vanished. After 4 minutes of feeling out, Henderson threw a left hook that dropped Shogun, and Henderson rushed in to finish. Shogun staggered back to his feet and threw a left hook of his own that badly hurt and dropped a careless Henderson. Shogun saw the round out in full mount, battering Henderson with some vicious ground and pound, and after the first round, Henderson wobbled his way back to his corner. Did these guys still have it? You bet your ass they did. In the second round, Shogun continued the onslaught and scored a huge knockdown uppercut that stunned Henderson, and Shogun continued to beat Henderson for the rest of round 2 in full guard. In round 3, a comfortable Shogun pushed the action and dictated the pace, and then out of nowhere, and no, it wasn't an RKO, Dan Henderson threw a thunderous right hand on the break of a clinch, knocking Shogun down and ending the fight. Never sleep on Dan Henderson's right hand. Number 3. Frankie Edgar vs Gray Maynard 2. Frankie Edgar vs Gray Maynard 2 at UFC 125 saw Edgar defending his lightweight belt against Maynard, a man who previously beat him back at UFC Fight Night 13. Coming off 2 big victories of one of the greatest of all time, BJ Penn, Edgar had something to prove, and that was avenging his only loss to Gray Maynard and cementing his position at the top of the lightweight division. In the first round, Maynard caught Edgar with a huge left hook and dropped him, and Maynard followed up with a nasty uppercut, planting Edgar flat on his face. The rest of the round was all Maynard, battering Edgar to and from each corner of the octagon. The following round saw a beat up Frankie Edgar edge his way back into the fight with dominant wrestling and striking, and ultimately securing him a draw that saw him retaining the lightweight title. You don't get beat up like that in the first round and come back from it, but man, is Frankie Edgar tough. Number 2. Anderson Silva vs Chael Sonnen 1. Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck. That's right, coming in at number 2 is Anson Silva vs Chael Sonnen 1. Prior to their title fight at UFC 117, Chael Sonnen had begun to make a name for himself as the bad guy by promoting his title fight with Silva in a succession of absolutely hilarious promos. There's a list there in itself. Other than the verbal warfare that Sonnen vs Silva was, it was actually a very intriguing fight. See, Sonnen was coming from a very strong wrestling background, and if he could neutralise Silva's striking game by taking him to the ground, things could get interesting. And that's exactly what happened. But the first round was incredible. Sonnen caught Silva with a big straight left and rocked Silva. Sonnen consistently pushed the pace, connecting, hurting Silva, and eventually took him down. What a round. Round 2 to 4 were an absolute Sonnen wrestling clinic, and he was on his way to winning the UFC middleweight title. In the final round, Chael again took Silva down, but this time at 2 minutes and 57 seconds, Silva found an opening and locked in a triangle from the bottom, a choke that Sonnen had consistently succumbed to in the past. Now with the armbar applied too, Sonnen had no choice but to tap, and with that Silva scored a comeback from a fight that he had undoubtedly lost. Number 1, Pat Barry vs Chet Kongo. Now the number 1 spot on this list goes to a fight that I can only really describe as absolutely ridiculous. Pat Barry vs Chet Kongo at UFC on Versus 4 had all the making of a very regular heavyweight fight. Pat Barry had made a name for himself in a terrific fight against legendary Pride fighter Mirko Cro Cop, and Chet Kongo, he was a solid gatekeeper of the heavyweight division. But I don't know what happened. Barry caught Kongo with a solid right hand in the first that dropped Kongo, and Barry followed up with some seriously savage shots that left Kongo waving around on his knees like he was doing some sort of prayer dance. Somehow referee Dave Mergliata let the action continue, and as Kongo reached his feet, Barry caught him with another big right hook that dropped him yet again. In maybe what was just instinct, Kongo scrambled for a takedown and found his way to his feet. Now, Kongo must have had a stash of senzu beans with him or something, because as Pat Barry pushed forward to finally put away the stubborn Kongo, Kongo threw 2 big right hands that knocked Barry out cold. If there is anything in this world that you just cannot write, this would be it. Go and watch it on UFC Fight Pass. And that's our list. If you know of any great comebacks that I haven't listed here, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter here. I'm Tom, and I'll see you next time.